morning, I'm Pauline Verzosa. It is Monday, the 6th of April, and we're bringing you Morning Matters because your mornings matter. And now first on the agenda, U.S. President Donald Trump is ramping up pressure on Iran, issuing a 48-hour ultimatum for Tehran to return to negotiations or face what he called, quote, all hell. More details in this report.
Thick clouds of smoke engulfed Bandar Mashar County in Khuzestan province, Iran, following an airstrike. Video shows parts of the area still on fire. Israel reportedly targeted a petrochemical zone, a facility that processes petroleum and natural gas. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu released a video confirming the strike. He vowed that Israel will end what he called Iran's terrorist regime. Meanwhile, exchanges of airstrikes continued overnight. U.S. President Donald Trump earlier said negotiations between the United States and Iran were underway. He also claimed that they had already weakened Iran's nuclear program and regime, but Iran appears unwilling to back down. According to Iranian media, the government rejected a U.S. proposal for a 48-hour ceasefire. Iran also shot down a U.S. fighter jet. The pilot was rescued, but one crew member went missing. Iranian authorities urged civilians to report any sightings of the survivor, even promising recognition to anyone who could capture or kill the crew member. This triggered a race between U.S. and Iranian forces to locate the missing personnel. Earlier, Trump said the incident would not affect negotiations, but hours later he issued a new warning on Truth Social, reminding Iran of his ultimatum: 48 hours to negotiate or reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Otherwise, quote, all hell will reign, end quote. Iran responded by warning that the region would descend into chaos if U.S. and Israeli attacks continue. Shortly after the threat, Trump announced that the missing crew member had been found and rescued by the U.S. military. The officer reportedly sustained injuries. Iran's Revolutionary Guards, however, claimed they had destroyed several U.S. aerial assets during the rescue operation. Amid the ongoing conflict, Pope Leo XIV issued a call during Easter Sunday Vigil, urging the world not to grow numb to war.
Well, another round of fuel price hikes is expected this week. Diesel is projected to increase by 17 to 19 pesos per liter and gasoline by 3 to 5 pesos per liter. The Energy Department says even with safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz, Filipinos should not expect immediate relief at the pump. Secretary Sharon Garin clarified that this does not address long-term supply issues and will not quickly bring down prices. She also explained much of the world's crude oil still passes through Hormuz, making global supply vulnerable to disruptions from the ongoing Middle East conflict. Pope Leo XIV marked his first Easter Mass with a call for global peace, while church leaders worldwide echoed his message of hope and order. Here's the report.
Pope Leo XIV marked his first Easter Mass as pontiff with a strong appeal for peace, urging the world to set aside weapons and confront global conflict through dialogue. Departing from tradition during his Orbi et Orbi blessing, he chose not to list the world's crisis by name, focusing instead on Easter's message of hope rooted in the resurrection. The first US-born Pope framed his homily around the need to resist indifference toward the growing toll of war.
Ma anche fuori di noi la morte è sempre in agguato. La vediamo presente nelle ingiustizie, negli egoismi di parte, nell'oppressione dei poveri, nella scarsa attenzione verso i più fragili. La vediamo nella violenza, nelle ferite del mondo, nel grido di dolore che si leva da ogni parte per i soprusi che schiacciano i più deboli, per l'idolatria del profitto che saccheggia le risorse della terra, per la violenza della guerra che uccide e distrugge.
Pope Leo also revived several papal customs, greeting the crowd in 10 languages, including Arabic, Chinese, and Latin, before touring via de la Consolacion in the Popemobile to meet pilgrims. Throughout Holy Week, the 70-year-old pontiff embraced historical rituals with renewed vigor. He washed the feet of priests on Holy Thursday, restoring a clergy-centered tradition after Pope Francis broadened a more inclusive approach. On Good Friday, he became the first pope in decades to carry the wooden cross through all 14 stations of the cross, an act that signaled both the physical demand he is willing to bear and the spiritual tone he intends to set for his papacy. In the Philippines, Manila Archbishop Jose Cardinal Advincula described Easter as a call to confront hatred and hostility without violence, supporting Pope Leo's appeal to end ongoing conflicts that continue to cause immense suffering. He reminded Filipinos that Easter should not be treated lightly or as a simple celebration because the resurrection carries a bold and transformative message at the heart of Christianity. Through observance of Easter, he said, means embracing renewal, deepening faith, standing against injustice, and remaining spiritually alert. Meanwhile, the Philippine National Police reported that the Holy Week observances nationwide were generally peaceful and orderly.
Now, back here at home, President Bongbong Marcos is urging Filipinos to carry the light of Easter in their daily lives, and not just in words, but in action. In his Easter Sunday message, the president called on the public to rise with renewed purpose, unyielding hope, and a deep sense of responsibility for one another. He said Easter symbolizes renewal and hope and should inspire Filipinos to translate faith into action for the good of others. Marcos added that building a stronger nation requires unity grounded in kindness and service. All Filipinos have begun returning to the metro after the Holy Week break. And for the latest at the Parañaque Integrated Terminal Exchange or PTEX, we have our mobile journalist Ivan Tarinque reporting to us live this morning. Ivan, marami na bang pasahero dyan?
Yes, Pauline. No, as of yung mga kapatid nga natin sa probinsya, long weekend, and doon nga ginunita. Ito nga Semana Santa, dito nga sa Gate 3 ng PITX, may kita nyo naman sa akin likuran, sunod-sunod na yung pagpasok ng mga pasahero na galing ng mga kanilang mga probinsya. No? Karamihan, nung nakausap natin na umuwi from their province, pabalik na dito sa Metro Manila, isa lang yung sagot. May pasok na sila tomorrow, kaya naman talagang umuwi sila ngayong araw. No? Siyempre, hindi rin na mawawala yung kanilang mga pasalubong sa kanilang mga pamilya galing from the province. Madalas nga natin nakita kanina, itong mga gulay, mga prutas, at siyempre yung iba may livestock na dala, gaya nga ng mga manok na nasa bayong. No? Pero expected Pulino, ayon sa terminal management, na ngayong araw talaga magpipeak yung mga pasahero dito sa loob ng terminal. No? Kahit na karamihan or marami nang umuwi nitong Sunday, expected na ngayong araw magpipeak. Pero in terms of comparison doon sa mga pasahero from last year and to this year, medyo malaki na yung difference. So kung last year pumalo sa 2.5 million yung mga pasahero dito, ngayong araw, mas lalagpas pata sa 2.6 million yung pasahero dito sa loob ng terminal. Pauline?
Evan, doon sa mga nakausap mong pasahero na bumiyahe dyan sa PTEX, ano ba yung mga dahilan na nabanggit nila kung bakit tumuloy pa rin sila sa kanilang mga biyahe, considering na bumaba na nga yung numbers ng mga umalis ng Metro Manila nitong Holy Week break dahil na rin sa taas ng pamasahe, pati na rin ng presyo ng petrolyo.
Alam mo, Pauline, doon nga, base doon sa nakuha nating datos kung bakit pumalo na sa 2.6 million yung mga pasahero dito, ayon sa terminal management, expected daw kasi napapalo yan dahil doon sa mga dating mga nagdadala ng sasakyan, ngayon mas pinili na lang sumakay nung bus. No? Pero yung ilan mga nakausap natin, mas pinili pa na nilang umuwi ng kanilang mga probinsya para doon magdaos ng Semana Santa. Ito lang daw kasi yung time na magkakaroon sila ng kahit po konting panahon na makakasama nila yung mga pamilya nila sa kanilang mga probinsya. Dahil usually daw kasi itong pag Semana Santa, ito lang daw yung chance na medyo kahit pa paano, 3 days, 5 days sila magkakasama magpapamilya. So kahit na medyo mahal yung pamasahe o kaya mahal naman yung presyo ng produktong diesel, okay lang naman daw dahil magkakasama naman sila pamilya sa isang linggo. Pauline?
Pero Evan, meron na bang update doon sa mga bus companies na nasa ilalim ng investigation for alleged illegal fare hikes?
Alam mo, Paulino, naging issue talaga yan since last week. No? Kahit na pinagbabawal na magkaroon ng fare hike, may ilang mga bus companies pa rin na allegedly na nagtaas ng presyo. No? Pero sa kabila niyan, Pauline, magkakaroon sila ng hearing on April 23 kasama nga itong LTFRB para sagutin kung bakit nga ba sila hindi patawan ng parusa. No? So, meron silang 10 days to answer that at syempre kung mapatunayan man na mapatunayan na talagang nagtaas sila ng presyo kahit bawal, posibleng makansela yung kanilang mga prangkisa. Pauline?
All right, well, thank you very much for that report. That was mobile journalist Ivan Tarinque reporting live from PTEX. Don't go away. We still have more matters to discuss right after this break. Keep it here on One News. Good morning and welcome back. I'm Pauline Verzosa. And here on Morning Matters, we talk about the most pressing issues and we give you the context behind the headlines. Well, as we know, Iran has assured the safe passage of Philippine-flagged vessels and Filipino seafarers through the Strait of Hormuz. The Department of Foreign Affairs says this comes after a phone call between Foreign Affairs Secretary Maria Teresa Lazaro and her Iranian counterpart, where both sides agreed to ensure safe and unhindered transit. The development is seen as crucial in protecting Filipino seafarers and securing the country's energy supply amid tensions in the Middle East. This as the Philippines continues to rely heavily on oil imports from the region, making the Strait of Hormuz a key route for global and local supply. The government says it will continue coordination with Iran to ensure stable fuel supply and the safety of Filipinos in the region. And to weigh in on this development, we're now joined by international relations expert Dr. Renato De Castro. Good morning to you, Dr. Renato, and thanks for being here on the program.
Good morning. Thank you very much for giving me a chance to express my.
All right, Dr. De Castro, well, we're now entering the sixth week of the U.S., Israel, and Iran conflict. At this point, how would you assess the scale and the trajectory of this war?
Well, right now, there is a sort of an impasse. You have, of course, President Donald Trump giving an ultimatum, but there are, of course, also a possibility of further escalation. As, of course, again, the warning by President Donald Trump that he decide to bomb Iran to the Stone Age. And, of course, you have this, and this is something, of course, that the Iranian government would not accept, an ultimatum with a warning that there'll be continuous bombing of Iran. So I'm very pessimistic about the possibility that this might end in a few weeks. Let's expect further escalation. And of course, given the fact that you already have American ground troops in the Middle East, let's wait for this. But let's also brace for the unexpected, the worst case scenario, which will be a further escalation of the conflict. Once, of course, you have American ground troops, conducting the boots on the ground operation, either in Prague Island or on the coast of Iran.
Right. And aside from this ultimatum of the U.S. given to Iran, I mean, on Easter Sunday, you have U.S. President Donald Trump renewing his threats to further escalate tensions in Iran by hitting civilian targets this time, right? He even amplified his threats by using expletives in his language, saying, Tuesday will be power plant day and bridge day all wrapped up in one. There will be nothing like it. Open the strait or you'll be in living hell. What did you make, Dr. De Castro, of the rhetoric of President Donald Trump here? And what will be the consequences politically and economically globally if this deadline passes without Iran backing down?
Well, of course, Donald Trump already expressed his intention to escalate the conflict. If he would not push through with it, then he would lose face. There's already, of course, intense pressure happening within American domestic society. A lot of Americans, like most people in the world, are complaining about the dramatic increase in the price of petroleum products. He did not get the support that he wanted from NATO member states. So again, the pressure is mounting for him to end this conflict by escalating it. But again, Iran has shown a degree of resilience, despite the fact that its capability to launch ballistic missiles and drones had been, of course, according to the Americans and the Israeli, have been degraded. Yet it could still fire ballistic missiles against Israel in Tel Aviv and also attack a number of Arab states through the use of drones and even ballistic missiles.
But this message of U.S. President Donald Trump, do you think it's sending a message of strength, of power, or is it sending a message of desperation because it's been 5 weeks already, and Iran has not surrendered to the terms of the U.S.
I think both. Of course, in a way, there's also an element of domestic pressure happening. You have a midterm election that would happen soon. So unless Donald Trump will be able to salvage the situation, chances are, of course, Congress might be controlled by the Democrats. And of course, this will have tremendous adverse political consequences on him. He might be even impeached once, of course, the Democrats take control of Congress. But at the same time, he's also marshaling up American forces. You have, of course, now the possible deployment of American ground troops. And of course, you have another carrier battle group that will be joining the American naval forces around the Gulf. And that's, of course, the USS Gerald Ford that had experienced fire, but sooner or later will be joining. And another carrier battle group, the George W. Bush, will be joining. You have around 4 carrier battle groups, plus, of course, the marshaling of American ground forces, both from the United States Marine Corps and, of course, from the United States Army. So we'll see. Two elements now. Element, of course, of political desperation, but at the same time, he had, of course, the Marines, the 82nd Airborne Division, and an additional naval task force that could boost his, of course, efforts and, of course, possibility that he could escalate the conflict.
Well, let's bring this closer to home, Dr. De Castro. We're now starting to see the wider effects of this conflict. But where does the Philippines sit in this equation? How much of this conflict is already affecting us as a country?
Well, it's already affecting us in terms of the price of petroleum products. I think that is something that is felt by every Filipino. The dramatic increase in the price of petroleum products, then probably even our agricultural sector might be affected because, again, the shipment of fertilizers have been held at the Strait of Hormuz. And of course, the sense of what's the term for this? A sense of uneasiness. The fact that we don't know whether price of petroleum products will go up further, or people are expecting, of course, that it might go down. But even though, our tankers, Filipino flag tankers, might be able to pass the Strait of Hormuz, economists have already said that let's not expect a dramatic decrease in the price of petroleum products.
But how significant, Dr. De Castro, and effective was the DFA's diplomatic approach in securing this assurance from Iran that Philippine vessels will be able to pass through the Strait of Hormuz unhindered, they will be safe, they assure the expeditious passage of all these vessels as well as the safety of Filipino seafarers?
That's a positive development. But of course, once, of course, you have the escalation by the United States, then Iran will have to use again its card, closing again the Strait of Hormuz as a retaliation against the possibility that the United States might escalate. The United States Marines might attack Prague Island. The United States 82nd Airborne Division might conduct airborne operation along the coast of Iran, and Iran would have no choice but to retaliate, close against the Strait of Hormuz, despite its guarantee to the Philippine government. So it's still a hostage to any strategic uncertainties or developments that might happen between the United States and, of course, Iran. It's there. The good intention is there by the Iranian government. But again, this will be subjected to possible escalation of the conflict that might be triggered by the United States' use of ground forces and Iran's effort, of course, to retaliate against American effort to escalate the conflict.
Right. Well, even Energy Secretary Sharon Garin underscored that the assurance that the DFA got is not a perfect solution. It does not eliminate all those risks, but it's an important step to improve our position, right? And she says what we have secured is a safe and preferential access. Let's try to simplify that, Dr. De Castro. What does safe and preferential access exactly mean for us, and how will that affect and translate to stability in terms of our supply?
Well, again, the point here is Iran's good intention.
Yeah.
Iran's warranty. I think the Iranians gave this guarantee in good faith. Again, this is subject to possible, escalation of conflict. Once, of course, Iran is pushed to the corner, then it will have to rely on its card. That is, of course, closing again the Strait of Hormuz despite its guarantee to the Philippine government to other countries. Iran had allowed the passage of oil tankers that are going to Japan, to India, and even to Thailand. But that is happening within the period where we have a sort of impasse. But once again, so you have this escalation. Again, we simply don't know whether this good intention of the part of Iran would hold water.
We're not really sure if this is enforceable or reliable because there are things that are beyond our control. But let's go to this assurance given by Iran, Dr. De Castro. What does it mean for them to offer this kind of agreement of assurance to our Foreign Affairs Department, considering that the Philippines is one of the United States, if not the oldest treaty ally in the Indo-Pacific? I mean, what does that say about their diplomatic posture towards countries like the Philippines amid this conflict?
Well, the Philippines has already indicated, although we are a treaty ally of the United States, at this, given this situation, we are in a way expressing that we're not hostile, and this has been accepted by Iran. In a way, this is a subtle message that we are neutral in this conflict, and we're not the only U.S. ally that have indicated that we don't want to take part in this conflict. Most NATO member states, Britain, France, Germany, Poland, a number, even Italy, and of course Spain, and it indicated we don't want to be part of this conflict. We are, we are treaty allies of the United States on the basis of our 1951 Mutual Defense Treaty. Spain, Germany, France, Britain are, of course, member states of NATO. But it is given this specific situation, we have decided that we do not consider this ourselves as belligerent or hostile to Iran. I think that's a matter of national interest. It's an exercise of what we call independent foreign policy.
So how do you suggest, Dr. De Castro, the Philippine government to balance its alliance with the U.S. and now this engagement with Iran?
Oh, this is, of course, an expression, an action of that balancing. That our treaty commitment with the United States is, of course, still based on a possible attack on both parties by a third party in the Indo-Pacific region, but it does not cover the Middle East. That's the same case with the NATO member states. The NATO member states specifically mentioned that this is what we call out-of-theater operation, which is not, of course, included in the Washington Treaty, 1949 Washington Treaty, that, of course, is the basis of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization.
Well, let's look at the bigger picture now, Dr. De Castro. The conflict is in its sixth week, and there are no signs pointing to any de-escalation in this war. How prepared is the Philippines for a prolonged conflict?
Well, eventually, of course, we would have to source our energy from other parts. I've read articles that the shipment of oil coming from North America is increasing. It will take some time, but sooner or later we'll have to adjust. Probably we'll have to source our energy needs from North America, Canada, Venezuela, and even the United States. It's already happening. South Korea and Japan are already getting their oil, their petroleum products from North America. It will take some time because of the distance and, of course, adjustment in terms of the processing. Because I'm not a chemist, but I've just read it from the accounts that, example, we have accepted oil from Russia, but there's a different approach in transforming these petroleum products into something we could use either as gasoline or diesel. So we will have certain adjustments. But sooner or later, we will have to think in terms of we have to get, have to rely on other sources of petroleum products, but also an opportunity for us to shift into renewable, specifically, of course, nuclear power.
Well, here's one question that's on everyone's minds, Dr. De Castro. Will things still ever go back to the way they were before this conflict, or is this the new normal already? We're seeing continuous rise in fuel prices, and that will be translating to higher fares, transportation costs, and eventually wage hikes. Is this the new normal already?
Well, that will be in terms of the economic. I'm more concerned about the new normal when it comes to geostrategic developments. That conflict happened in the Middle East, and probably this might trigger other conflicts closer to home. So what we're seeing right now is a dramatic change in the global society, which of course began with the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Now you have wars happening in the Middle East, and I will not be surprised that sooner than later we might be witnessing or probably even experiencing that kind of conflict right in our neighborhood, because you already also have geostrategic flashpoints in right in our neighborhood, just north of the Philippines, and of course we also have that dispute with China in the South China Sea.
And finally, as a final note, Dr. De Castro, I guess what should Filipinos prepare for if this war continues to drag on for the next few weeks?
We have to develop a sense of national resilience and national unity. Let's not despair about what's happening. It's an opportunity for us to strengthen our sense of nationalism, national cohesion, and develop our capability to withstand and probably surmount and even become a stronger nation in face of this crisis. Because as I pointed out, this crisis might just be the beginning or the fuse that will trigger other geostrategic clashes or conflicts, not only in the Middle East, but also in our neighborhood in the Indo-Pacific region.
All right, well, we're going to have to leave this conversation there for now, but thank you very much for sharing all your insights with us this morning. That was international relations expert, Dr. Renato De Castro.
Thank you very much.
Oh, do stay tuned. Morning Matters will be back after this short break. Keep it here on One News. Welcome back. You're still watching Morning Matters here on One News. The International Criminal Court, or ICC, is set to decide on April 22 whether former President Rodrigo Duterte's case for crimes against humanity can proceed or be blocked on jurisdictional grounds. Duterte's legal team maintains that the Philippines' withdrawal from the ICC 2 years before the investigation strips the court of authority over him. The pretrial chamber rejected this claim in October 2025, ruling that jurisdiction remains because the alleged crimes occurred while the Philippines was still a member of the Rome Statute. The defense immediately filed an appeal, which is now awaiting a final ruling from the ICC Appeals Chamber. And if the court upholds jurisdiction, the charges could proceed to trial, potentially starting towards the end of 2026. And joining us this morning is Attorney Gilbert Andres, an ICC-accredited lawyer, to discuss what the April 22 decision on Duterte's case could mean. Good morning, Attorney Gilbert. Thanks for being here on Morning Matters.
Good morning, Pauline, and good morning to your viewers in Morning Matters.
All right, Attorney. Well, as we know, the defense continues to challenge the ICC's jurisdiction, and the appeals chamber is set to rule on this on April 22. How confident are you that the court will assert its authority over this case?
I think the prosecutor, as well as the Office of the Public Counsel for Victims, they have adequately addressed the issue of jurisdiction. And if you look at the jurisprudence on international criminal tribunals, no international criminal tribunal has actually divested itself of jurisdiction. They have always affirmed that they have jurisdiction over international crimes. So it's actually the previous precedents of other international tribunals that will give us strength to whatever decision will be of the appeals chamber.
Well, Attorney Gilbert, the argument of the defense is heavily anchored on the Philippines' withdrawal from the ICC 2 years before the investigation started. How strong or weak is that argument?
Well, I think the text itself of the Rome Statute is robust enough to actually accommodate the preliminary examination as sufficing to... Kasi on Article 127, Paragraph 2, it says that any withdrawal will not prejudice any matter under consideration. And in fact, the pretrial chamber has construed any matter as being expansive enough to include even preliminary examination.
Well, in the past entire year, former President Duterte did not attend any of the proceedings personally, attorney. No? He was citing health concerns as well as questioning itong ang jurisdiction ng ICC. Will his absence have any material impact on how this case moves forward?
None at all. It has no material impact as to the scheduling order of the appeals chamber. There's no requirement for the suspect to attend the open court delivery by the appeals chamber.
And so if this jurisdiction is confirmed and upheld, what will be the next steps there, attorney? Because the prosecutors say that trial could begin towards the end of 2026. How realistic is that timeline?
Well, as to the trial proper itself or the pre-trial, remember we're still in pre-trial, that's really up to the pre-trial chamber because there will be a decision on the confirmation of charges. So that will be more or less at the latest April 30. And then let's say the pre-trial chamber confirms towards trial, then it takes more or less at least 6 months for the preparation until 1.5 years. So 6 months will be more or less October. That will be the earliest if ever the pre-trial chamber decides that they should proceed to trial.
I see. So if the appeals chamber decides on April 22 that there is jurisdiction indeed, we will still have to wait for the decision of the pre-trial chamber on the confirmation of charges hearing. Tama ba, attorney?
Yes, that's correct. Because remember, the issue of jurisdiction is separate from the issue of the confirmation of charges hearing. Issue of jurisdiction is now before the appeals chamber. The issue of confirmation of charges is before the pre-trial chamber.
Now, in the event, attorney, that the appeals chamber rules in favor of Mr. Duterte, what would that mean for the ICC proceedings? Will there be any remedies available for the prosecution as well as the victims?
Well, this is really a hypothetical, In any hypothetical, it's really difficult to predict, But suffice it to say that there's actually, if it's the appeals chamber, then that's already the appeals chamber. But I think it's really the weight of history as well as precedents by previous international tribunals that actually supports confirmation of jurisdiction over an international crime.
Well, as you mentioned, Attorney Andres, we are still in the pre-trial phase. It's been a month already since the confirmation of charges hearings took place over at The Hague. We saw you there in action, and now the ICC pre-trial chamber has about 60 days, to decide whether the charges will be confirmed against former President Duterte. Sabi niyo, Attorney, they have until April 30. But is there any indication or is it possible for the chamber to announce a decision earlier than this date?
Well, it's really up to the pretrial chamber. The 60-day period is really given so that there's adequate time for the pretrial chamber to study the case, the facts, the evidence, as well as the law. Now, whether or not the pretrial chamber will maximize that, it's up to its sound discretion. But suffice it to say that there's a limit, and that's April 30. So there's no surprise as to when is the maximum limit.
And that's already at the end of this month, Attorney. So for the victims and the families that you represent, what does this stage of the process mean? And are expectations high as we approach this crucial, pivotal day when the announcement, when the decision of the judges will be made?
Well, it's very significant, Pauline, for the victims because they see this as their first step towards attaining truth and justice under international law. And they know that this is just the first step. There will be numerous other steps going forward. And they really hope that this will proceed to trial because the victims think that the prosecution has adequately presented enough evidence to show that they should proceed to trial. And the common legal representative for victims have also adequately shared the views and concerns, especially the local context of the victims of this drug war campaign.
And looking back at the confirmation of charges hearing back in February, during the hearings, we saw the defense there anchoring their argument on saying that the prosecution's evidence was cherry-picked and that there is no proof of a widespread and systematic attack. Now that the hearings are over, Attorney, what was your assessment on how the prosecution handled their arguments and evidence, and likewise, what stood out for you in terms of the defense's arguments?
Well, I think the prosecution has presented enough evidence to show that there's substantial grounds to believe, that they should proceed to trial. And remember, Pauline, this confirmation of charges, it does not require proof beyond reasonable doubt. It only requires substantial grounds to believe that the suspect committed the crimes. And the prosecution has adequately showed evidence, no less than the statements itself of the suspect. Numerous public statements of the suspect calling for the killings. So I think that's really the most important exhibits. Now, I understand that the defense presented its own technical argument as to the causal nexus. There should be a causal nexus between the statements of Mr. Duterte as well as the killings. But I think that will be more significant when it comes to trial proper. But for this case, it's still in pretrial. So substantial grounds to believe has already been shown by the prosecutor.
And for your part, Attorney Andres, you highlighted how the anti-drug campaign disproportionately affected the poor and the marginalized. How significant is that to the argument of the prosecution, and how will the ICC judges treat this, and how will this influence their decision on confirming the charges against former President Duterte?
I think that's significant on numerous points. Number one of which is that there were real people who were victimized by Mr. Duterte's anti-drug campaign. And it's important to show their humanity, to show their context, to show that they were from marginalized, underprivileged sectors of Philippine society. And that number two, it's also important to show ano ba talaga yung suffered harm, ano ba talaga yung dagok na kanila pong na-experience under the anti-drug campaign, para po talaga maintindihan ng mga West ng pretrial chamber. Dahil hindi naman po sila nakapunta dito, kaya kailangan po namin ipaabot yung views at concerns at yung mga suffered harm po ng mga biktima.
Attorney, have additional victims come forward already since the hearings concluded back in February?
Well, I think if hopefully there will be a trial proper, magiging open po yung applications for victim participation, at sa tingin po namin marami pong mga biktima na gusto pa pong mag-apply to be accredited as victim participants.
Are you personally in talks with more victims, Attorney?
Well, we're always in that process, hindi ko lang sabihin yung how we go about that process for security and confidentiality, but we're always in that process.
Well, during the confirmation of charges hearing, several of former President Duterte's allies, including Senator Bato de la Rosa, were named as co-perpetrators of this drug war. Attorney, could arrest warrants realistically be issued for these individuals? Are they forthcoming?
Well, number one, it's really difficult to say that there's a standing arrest warrant against Mr. Bato, because if we look at the rules and the regulations, any application for an arrest warrant is actually under seal, meaning to say secret po yan. But number two, having said that, it's only logical, since he was a named co-perpetrator, it's just logical that an arrest warrant will be applied for. Now, whether or not that has been applied for, it's really under seal. No one can say for sure except the prosecutor and the pretrial chamber. But on the part of the victims, really hope that there's already an application, an arrest warrant itself against Mr. Bato de la Rosa.
And how will that work, Attorney? Will separate charges need to be filed against these co-perpetrators? Would they also have to be charged with crimes against humanity? Kumbaga, separate na kaso pa, apart from this that the former president is facing before the ICC?
Yes, it's separate. First, it's a separate application for an arrest warrant. Next, if that person is arrested, then it's a separate initial appearance before the pretrial chamber. And Next is a separate document containing the charges. So it will be separate, but it's under the umbrella of the Philippine Situation Investigation.
And hypothetically, Attorney Andres, no, if an ICC arrest warrant is issued, does the Philippine executive have the legal authority to defer its implementation? Because back in February as well, the DOJ said it took the position that it would be more prudent to wait for the Supreme Court's resolution on the pending motions on the validity of Mr. Duterte's arrest last year before it acts on any possible ICC arrest warrant. The question is, does the executive have that prerogative in this kind of situation?
Well, let's look at the legal basis for any implementation of a warrant by the ICC here in the Philippines. The legal basis is actually Section 17, second paragraph of Republic Act 9851 or the IHL Act. Now, it's Philippine authorities, so they can surrender any person who has an arrest warrant or is being investigated or prosecuted before an international tribunal. And I think if the Philippine government, the executive, will just be consistent with Philippine state practice with respect to the arrest warrant against Mr. Duterte, then they should be consistent also in implementing that against any of the named co-perpetrators in the charges against Mr. Duterte. So I think I'll just ask for consistency and for the Philippines to be implementing its own state practice.
And while you are waiting for those two key dates, April 22 and April 30, where the ICC will make its decision on the jurisdiction and the confirmation of charges, Attorney, how are you keeping yourselves busy? Are you already preparing for a full-blown trial regardless of the decision that will come by the end of the month?
Yes, we're always preparing for that, Pauline, because we need to be prepared because we have a duty to adequately represent our clients who are the victims of the anti-drug campaign. And I just want to say that the victims are actually at the center of these proceedings. This is a victim-centered approach to the ICC proceedings. And in fact, it's the first international criminal tribunal that puts the victims at the heart of the proceedings. So they have that right to justice, they have that right to the truth, and we are ready to implement their views and concerns.
All right, well, thank you very much for your time and for sharing your insights with us this morning. That was ICC accredited lawyer, Attorney Gilbert Andres.
Thank you very much.
Now, don't go away. We still have more matters to discuss right after this break. Keep it here.
And then that will last until tomorrow, so 6, 7, 8, and then wala sa 9 dahil holiday, and then that will resume on 10, and then 17, then 20 to 24, no? And then yung mga actually may supporter din pala dito, Pauline, no? Sabi nila 300 strong sila and lahat sila mga nakaitim, same pa rin naman yung kanilang panawagan, no? But so far, in any minute, inaasahan natin na magsisimula na agad yung paglilitis.
And Arles, finally, kailangan ba dumalo personally ng mga akusado kasama na si former Senator Bong Revilla?
Yes, Pauline, that is a mandatory. Hindi pwede nung katulad nung kanilang preliminary conference na i-waive yung kanilang appearance, no? Kailangan personal sila kumarap dito.
All right, well, thank you very much for that report. That was mobile journalist Arles de los Santos reporting from the Sandigan Bayan. And in other news, the Department of Health has denied reports of an emergency lockdown due to the so-called cicada COVID-19 variant. In an advisory, the DOH said there is no truth to claims that a lockdown would be enforced to contain the variant and assure the public that there is no reason for concern. The Health Department also urged people to avoid spreading misinformation and to rely only on official DOH announcements for accurate updates. The cicada variant, part of the Omicron lineage, was first detected in South Africa and is currently under monitoring by the World Health Organization, with no reported cases in the Philippines so far. A Chinese research vessel has been seen or spotted operating inside the Philippines' exclusive economic zone, particularly in the resource-rich Philippine rice. An independent maritime monitoring group says the ship has been conducting unauthorized survey activities in the area since early April. The vessel was tracked near Benham Rise, Batanes, and the Babuyan Islands. The incident comes amid continued calls from Philippine officials and experts for a united front and stronger defense cooperation as the country asserts its maritime rights in the region through diplomacy and international law. Now shifting gears to sports, UAAP volleyball heats up on Easter Sunday as teams battle for crucial positioning in the tightening Final Four race. Volleyball journalist Denise Valdez-Sancho has this report.
UAAP volleyball intensifies in Eastern Sunday action at the UST Quadricentennial Pavilion as the Final Four race continues to tighten. In the women's division, the NU Lady Bulldogs remain firm at number 2 after a straight sets win over the Adamson Lady Falcons 25-20, 25-21, 25-21. Camila Lamina ran the offense with 20 excellent sets and added 3 points, as NU secured its second straight win to improve to 8-3.
This game is very important for us because syempre, naging crucial na yung mga matches and magandang way to pave yung mga next few games ka natin. So we're just happy and we just have to continue training and preparing for our games. Peace.
Meanwhile, the UST Golden Tigresses moved up to solo third after a dominant sweep of the UE Lady Warriors. 21-25, 24-26, 20-25. Angge Poyos led the way with 17 points built on 14 attacks, 2 aces and 1 block, while also contributing 9 excellent digs and 6 receptions in an all-around performance on home courts.
Kanya sabi natin, mental toughness and yung patience din namin sa isa't isa and sa sarili na pag nahabol talagang natitense na kami. So siguro yung pasensya and tiyaga na ginagawa namin every training na sana ma-apply namin. And ginagawa namin siya yung pressure gain sa training. So grateful na na-apply namin today. And sana marami pang lapses na pero need namin trabaho din sa next na mga trainings. Especially sa mga next na mga makakalaga namin.
In the men's division, the NU Bulldogs clinched a Final Four spot after surviving the Adamson Soaring Falcons in 5 sets, 23-25, 25-20. 21-25, 25-21, 15-8. Leo Ordiales powered the Bulldogs with 26 points. Despite the absence of head coach Dante Alinsunurin, NU held its ground to avoid a major upset. The UST Golden Spikers inched closer to the Final Four after a 4-set win over the UE Red Warriors 25-22, 25-15, 25-19, 25-23. Josh Ibanez delivered 25 points built on 21 attacks, 2 blocks, and 2 aces, while also providing solid defense. Kapatid Denise Valdez-Sancho, we are One News.
And that wraps up today's episode of Morning Matters. We hope we've given you just the right start to your morning. Let's make the day matter. I'm Pauline Verzosa. Kapatid, we are One News, all sides, all the time.